The sewing machine fell silent, and in the stillness, Jacob's voice. My son cut through me like a blade, tearing my heart to pieces. I stood in the living room, my hands clutching the frayed hem of my apron, the air heavy with the faint scent of thread and fabric softener. The hum of my life's work, decades of stitching, late into the night had stopped. I just told Jacob and his wife Mia that my tailoring shop was gone, swallowed by the big brands that had flooded the city. My voice trembled as I spoke, hoping for a shred of understanding, but Jacob's face twisted, his eyes flashing with a rage I'd never seen. You're a burden now, he spat. You think you can just sit here and leech off us? Mia lounged on the couch, her hair tossed with a practiced flick, her smile sharp and cold. Honestly, Anna, you're useless without that shop, she said. Maybe try cleaning houses. It's not like you've got real skills. Helen, her mother, sat beside her, nodding with a smirk that cut deeper than words. My daughter's right, she added. You can't stay here for free. There's probably a family out there needing a live-in maid. You'd fit right in. Their words landed like blows, each one stealing my breath. This was the house I'd built for Jacob, paid for, with every late-night seam, every skipped meal, every dream I'd buried. I'd poured my life into these walls, into him, and now I was nothing to them. A parasite, a failure. I wanted to scream to tell them about the $6 million my parents had left me in a trust fund, a secret I'd kept to surprise Jacob and Mia with a secure future. But their cruelty choked the truth in my throat. They didn't deserve to know, not after this. Jacob paced his fists, clenched, his voice rising. You've always dragged me down, he said. If you'd been smarter, we wouldn't be stuck like this. Each syllable was a reminder of the nights I'd sat by his bed in the orphanage, his small hand gripping mine, his 3-year-old eyes wide with fear. I'd chosen him, loved him, as my own, given up everything to be his mother. Now he stood here, spitting on every sacrifice, his words a betrayal sharper than any knife. I glanced at the shelf where a faded scarf I'd knitted for Jacob at 6 lay folded, its wool soft from years of his touch. My chest tightened, a wave of longing crashing over me. I saw him as a boy, giggling as I wrapped it around his neck, his warmth against me, a promise I'd believed in. Part of me wanted to beg him to remember to see the mother who'd given her all, who'd stayed up sewing through fevers and tears to keep him safe. But Mia's voice sliced through. You're not staying, Anna, she said. Figure it out. Scrub floors or something. Helen's laugh was a jagged edge chilling my skin. I forced myself to breathe, to steady the storm inside. I'd spent my life putting Jacob first, Kamchu, every hardship to keep our family whole, to give him the love I'd never had. But this wasn't just ingratitude. It was a dismantling of everything I'd built. I looked at Jacob, searching for the boy I'd raised, but his eyes were cold, unyielding. You really want me gone, I said softly, my voice barely a whisper, heavy with the weight of truth. Jacob didn't blink. You heard me, he said. Get out. He kicked my duffel bag across the floor, the thud echoing like a door slamming on our past. I stared at the bag, my clothes spilling out, and felt something shatter inside. Not just my heart, but the hope I'd clung to, that love could fix us. I'd Kamchu for so long, swallowing my pain to keep him close, but this was too much. I knelt, gathering my things, my fingers brushing the scarf's worn threads. Tears burned my eyes, but I blinked them back. I wouldn't let them see me break. I stood, my gaze locking on Jacob one last time. If this is what you want, I said, I'm done trying to prove myself to you. Mia rolled her eyes, her voice dripping with scorn. Good. We don't need your drama, Helen added. There's a shelter downtown. You'll manage. Their voices merged into a cruel hum, but I shut them out. I slung the bag over my shoulder, my steps slow but deliberate toward the door. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a text from the lawyer managing my parents' trust fund. Your inheritance is ready. Confirmed to proceed. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the delete key. Jacob's shadow loomed behind me, his presence a silent challenge. I pressed delete the message, vanishing, leaving no trace. Let him think I was nothing. Let them all think it. The door closed hard behind me, a sharp, final sound that sealed the end of my old life. I stood on the porch, the night air biting my skin. My hands shook, not from cold, but from the weight of loss. Jacob wasn't just my son. He was my purpose, the reason I'd kept going after my husband died, after my parents passed. I'd built my world for him come true, every sacrifice to keep him safe, and now it was ashes. But beneath the pain, a spark flickered. They thought they'd crushed me, but they didn't know the truth. $6 million untouched waiting. I could have thrown it in their faces, but I held back not out of fear, but because I wanted them to feel the cost of their betrayal. I took a step, then another, the gravel crunching under my shoes. The streetlights cast long shadows, and I saw myself as I'd been a young woman choosing a frightened boy over everything else. I'd given him a home, a life, a mother, and he'd given me this, a bag and a closed door. My throat tightened, and I let the ache settle raw and real. But I kept walking. Deep inside, I knew this wasn't the end. It was a beginning, a reckoning for those who'd underestimated me. Sip some warm water to soothe your throat, and if you're hooked on this story, let me know where you're tuning in from. Don't forget to hit subscribe to support us. I walked away from the house, the gravel crunching under my shoes, each step a quiet rebellion against the pain clawing at my heart. The night air stung my face, but the real cold was inside a hollow ache where Jacob's love had once lived. My duffel bag slumped against my shoulder, heavy with the fragments of a life I'd stitched together for him. I didn't look back. The slammed door echoed in my mind, a brutal reminder of the family I'd lost. But I wasn't defeated, not yet. By morning, a curt text from Mia summoned me back to the house. My heart flickered with a fragile hope that Jacob might soften, that the boy I'd raised might still linger beneath his anger. I stepped into the living room, the air thick with tension, and found them waiting. Jacob leaned against the wall, his arms crossed, his jaw tight. Mia sat on the couch, scrolling her phone, her lips curled in a faint smirk. Helen, Mia's mother, perched beside her, her eyes glinting with disdain, as if my presence was an insult. Their silence screamed demands, and I knew no apology was coming. I spoke first, my voice steady despite the knot in my chest. I'm done working, I said. I've given enough. It's time I rest. Jacob's laugh was sharp, a blade slicing through my resolve. Rest. You got nothing to rest on, he said. No pension, no savings. You're delusional if you think you can stop. Mia looked up, her tone icy. Our expenses are about to double with the baby, Anna, she said. You need to pull your weight. Helen nodded, her voice laced with false pity. Be realistic, she said. You're not young anymore. Nobody's giving you a free pass. Their words were stones, each one bruising the hope I'd carried. I wanted to tell them about the $6 million my parents had left me, the trust fund I'd planned to share to ease their burdens. But their greed, their cruelty, locked the truth behind my lips. They saw me not as a mother, but as a tool to exploit a seamstress to keep their lives comfortable. I clenched my hands, fighting the urge to beg for their understanding. I'd spent decades Cam Chew swallowing my pain to keep our family whole, but this was a line I couldn't cross. Mia stood, her eyes narrowing. There's a diner hiring dishwashers, she said, or some rich family needs a live-in maid. You've done that kind of work before. It's perfect. Helen's smile was venomous. Why make this harder than it needs to be, she said. You're not cut out for anything else. Jacob stepped closer, his voice low, menacing. You should have planned better before tanking your shop, he said. We're not your charity case. The room seemed to tilt their voices, a wave threatening to drown me. My mind drifted to Jacob at 8, his fevered forehead hot against my palm as I sewed by his bedside, praying he'd pull through. I'd worked 3 jobs that month, my fingers raw to pay for his medicine. That boy was gone, replaced by this stranger who saw me as a burden. My heart ached, a raw wound pulsing with memories. I wanted to fall to my knees to plead for him, to see me, to remember the mother who'd given everything. But then I saw the house deed on the table now, in Jacob and Mia's names. They'd schemed behind my back, stealing what I'd built. The betrayal burned away my hesitation. I drove to Martha's cottage, my hands trembling on the wheel. Martha, my oldest friend, a retired tailor, lived on the city's edge, her home a haven of warmth. Her kitchen smelled of chamomile tea and fresh bread, wrapping me in comfort as I sank into a chair. I poured out my pain, my voice breaking, as I described Jacob's rage, Mia's scorn, Helen's sneers. I admitted the memories that haunted me. Jacob's laughter, his small hand in mine at the orphanage, his trust in me as his mother. I wondered if I could forgive him, if my Kamchu could still hold our family together. Martha listened, her eyes soft but steady. She poured tea, her hands calm, and spoke plainly. Love doesn't mean letting them crush you, Anna, she said. You've given him your life. He chose to betray you. Protect yourself now. You owe that to the woman who's carried this alone. Her words were a spark igniting the strength I'd buried. I saw it clearly. Jacob wasn't the boy I'd saved, the one I'd sewn clothes for through sleepless nights. He was a man who'd chosen greed over gratitude. I thanked Martha, my resolve hardening like fabric under a hot iron. I returned to the house one last time, knowing what I had to do. Jacob stood alone, his face a mask of impatience. I looked at him, my voice firm. I'm retiring, I said. That's final. No one controls my life but me. His eyes widened, then darkened with fury. You're insane, he snapped. You'll be begging on the streets in a month. I held his gaze, searching for a trace of remorse, but found only contempt. I spoke the truth I'd held for years. You're not my biological son, Jacob, I said. I adopted you from an orphanage at 3, abandoned, like you didn't matter. I chose you. I gave you everything. And this is how you repay me. He froze, his face paling, but his anger surged back. So what? You lied to me my whole life, he said. You owe me for that. His words were a final cut, severing the last thread of hope I'd clung to. I lifted my duffel bag, my movements deliberate. We're done, I said. From this moment, you and I are nothing to each other. I walked out the door, closing softly behind me, a quiet end to a bond I'd thought unbreakable. I checked into a 5-star hotel downtown, a place I'd never imagined entering. The marble floors and chandeliers felt alien, but I stood tall, using the trust fund to claim a suite. As I unpacked, I found a letter from my mother tucked in an old coat's pocket. It was written before she died, her handwriting shaky but clear. The money is yours, Anna. Use it to live, not just survive. I read it again, my fingers tracing her words, a reminder of the strength she'd seen in me. I folded it carefully, my heart steady. Jacob, Mia, and Helen thought they'd won. They had no idea what I was capable of. The hotel suite gleamed with polished elegance, its marble floors and silk curtains a world away from the worn wood of Jacob's house. I stood by the window, the city's glow stretching below my mother's letter, folded in my pocket, her words urging me to live, not just survive. I'd severed ties with Jacob, but his betrayal lingered like a bruise, aching with every thought of the boy I'd raised. I pushed the pain aside, focusing on the future. Today, I'd begin shaping a home that was mine alone. I stepped into a high-end furniture showroom, its glass walls catching the noon sun, the air humming with soft jazz and hushed voices of wealthy patrons. I'd come to furnish my new place, a tangible step toward reclaiming my life. A young saleswoman approached, her smile warm and unforced. She introduced herself as Sarah, her badge gleaming with the shine of a new hire. Her kindness felt like a balm after the venom I'd faced, and I asked to see their finest collections. She guided me to a display of velvet sofas and carved tables, her enthusiasm infectious. My hand grazed the plush surface of a navy sofa, and my breath hitched. It was nearly identical to one Jacob had loved as a teenager, when we'd sat together, planning a future that now felt like a dream. I saw him in my mind, sprawled across our old couch, his laughter filling the room as we watched cartoons. The memory was a sharp pang stirring a longing to reach out to ask if he regretted his cruelty. My fingers fumbled for my phone, and I texted Martha, my heart racing. I'm at a showroom, and this sofa reminds me of him. What if he's sorry? Martha's reply was swift, her words a steady anchor. He chose to hurt you, Anna. Don't let love pull you back into his trap. You're building something new. Her message grounded me like a needle threading through tangled fabric. I nodded to Sarah, my voice steady, and asked about the sofa's price. Before she could answer, a voice sliced through the air, sharp and biting. Who let her in? This isn't a thrift store. I turned to see Jane Helen's cousin, striding toward us, her heels clicking with menace. I'd met her at Jacob's wedding, her gaze dismissive, as if I were beneath notice. Now she loomed close, her voice loud enough to draw stares. A tailor. You can't afford this place, she said. Get out before you waste our time. The showroom hushed eyes pinning me like spotlights. Jane's words echoed Mia's Helen's. Jacob's each one a reminder of the scorn I'd endured. My heart pounded, but I stood firm, Martha's words echoing in my mind. I'm here to buy furniture, I said, my tone even. I belong here as much as anyone. Jane laughed, a harsh grating sound that turned heads. Belong. You're a nobody, she said. Go back to your needle and thread. The weight of the crowd's gaze pressed against me, and for a moment I felt the old urge to shrink, to disappear, as I'd done so often to keep peace. But I wasn't that woman anymore, the one who came to hold her family together. I reached into my bag, pulling out a bank statement from my parents' trust fund. $6 million, I said, holding it up. Is this enough to shop here? The room gasped, a ripple of shock spreading. Sarah's eyes widened, her hands clasped in awe. Jane's smirk vanished, her face flushing, then draining to a sickly white. She grabbed the statement, her fingers trembling as she scanned it. This is fake, she stammered. There's no way you have this money. You're a fraud. Her voice cracked, desperation creeping in as the crowd murmured. I kept my composure, my resolve unyielding. I turned to Sarah. I'll take this sofa and the dining set over there, I said. Total it up. Sarah nodded, her fingers quick on her tablet, her excitement palpable. The crowd's whispers shifted, some nodding in respect, others staring in disbelief. Jane's panic flared, her eyes darting. She lunged forward, her coffee cup, tilting the hot liquid splashing across my blouse. Oops, she said, her sneer returning. Maybe you should clean that up yourself. The crowd gasped again, and the sting of humiliation burned. But I stood tall, my voice calm. I pulled out my phone, dialing the police. I'd like to report harassment and defamation. I said, my words clear. Jane's face crumpled, her bravado gone. "You can't do this," she hissed. "I know you're kind. You're nothing." The police arrived swiftly, 2 officers with steady professional gazes. I handed them the bank statement and trust fund documents, all notarized, proving the $6 million was mine. They reviewed them, then turned to Jane. "You've made baseless accusations," one said. "That's defamation. Apologize now, or we'll proceed with charges." Jane's lips quivered, her eyes blazing with resentment, but she had no choice. "I'm sorry," she muttered, her voice a begrudging whisper, her gaze fixed on the floor. I turned to Sarah, who stood frozen, her eyes shining with gratitude. "I want you to handle my purchase," I said. "You've been professional from the start." Sarah beamed, her hands shaking, as she finalized the sale, a $200,000 order that marked her first major commission. The crowd murmured approval, their whispers now of admiration. I caught a woman's voice, nearby, soft but clear. "That's the Thompson's daughter," she said. "Her parents helped so many in this city." The words stirred a memory of my parents' charity work, but I pushed it aside, focusing on the present. I left the showroom, my blouse damp, but my spirit unbroken. Jane's defeat was a step forward, but Jacob, Mia, and Helen still loomed, their betrayal a challenge I'd face. For now, I carried the weight of my mother's trust, and it was enough. The showroom's murmurs faded as I stepped into the sunlight, my damp blouse, a badge of Jane's, defeated malice. Her forced apology echoed in my mind, a small victory, but the ache of Jacob's absence pulsed beneath it. I touched the bank statement in my pocket, proof of the $6 million my parents left me, and felt a quiet resolve. I wasn't the broken woman Jacob, Mia, and Helen had tried to make me. I was Anna, and I was carving out a life they couldn't touch. Weeks later, I stood backstage at a fashion exhibition, the air thick with the scent of perfume and the hum of anticipation. The event honored local designers, and I'd been invited to present a dress inspired by my years as a tailor. The stage glowed under warm lights, a sea of faces waiting beyond the velvet curtain. I smoothed the silk of my creation, a flowing gown, woven with memories of my mother's delicate sketches. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of this moment. I was no longer just a seamstress stitching in the shadows. I was claiming my place in the light. As I adjusted the dress on its mannequin, a voice cut through the crowd's murmur, sharp and venomous. "Look who's pretending to be a designer now." I turned to see Helen, Mia's mother, gliding toward me, her silk scarf trailing like a banner of disdain. Her friends followed, their eyes gleaming with practiced judgment. Helen's lips curled into a sneer. A tailor at a fashion show. "You're out of your league, Anna. Stick to mending hems." Her friends tittered, their laughter a chorus, honed by years of superiority. Her words stung, echoing the scorn I'd faced from Jacob, Mia, and Jane. My heart wavered, and I pictured Jacob in the audience, his face soft with the pride he'd once shown when I'd sewn him a jacket for his first job. The image was a quiet wound, stirring a longing to believe he could still be that boy. I slipped behind a rack of fabrics, my fingers fumbling for my phone. I called Martha, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm at the exhibition and Helen's here," I said. "I keep seeing Jacob in the crowd. What if he could be proud of me?" Martha's voice was firm, a steady thread through my doubt. "He chose to betray you, Anna," she said. "This is your moment, not his. Don't let love blind you to the truth." Her words steadied me, pulling me back from the edge of my heart's pull. I thanked her, my resolve tightening like a well-stitched seam. I stepped out, facing Helen. "I belong here," I said, my voice calm but unyielding. "I'm presenting a design, and I'm not leaving." Helen's eyes narrowed, her smile dripping with malice. "You, a designer, don't humiliate yourself," she said. Her friends nodded, one muttering about my rough hands, another scoffing that I lacked the class for such an event. The host called my name, and I walked onto the stage, the silk dress shimmering under the lights. I spoke briefly, my voice clear, explaining how my mother's love for beauty had shaped my craft. I unveiled the gown, its graceful lines flowing like water, its fabric catching the light in soft waves. The audience gasped, then erupted in applause. Their cheers, a tide lifting me higher. A prominent critic in the front row stood, her voice carrying. "This is artistry," she said, "a vision of timeless elegance." Helen's face contorted, her poise unraveling. She pushed through the crowd, her voice shrill. "That's stolen," she shouted. "She copied that design. She's a fraud." The accusation drew sharp breaths from the audience. I felt a flicker of the old urge to retreat to Kamchu, as I had for so long to keep peace. But I stood firm, Martha's words anchoring me. I pulled my mother's sketchbook from my bag, its pages worn but vivid with her drawings. I held it up, flipping to the gown's original sketch, dated decades ago, in her hand. "This is mine," I said. "My mother's legacy, my creation. Show your proof if you have it." The critic stepped forward, examining the sketchbook. She nodded, her tone authoritative. "This is genuine," she said. "The design is original." Helen's friends fell silent, their faces paling. Helen stammered, her voice breaking. "You can't have made this," she said. "You're nobody." Her desperation was raw, her status crumbling before the crowd. One of her friends, a woman in a garish hat, lunged forward, grabbing for the microphone in my hand. "Thief!" she screamed, her fingers brushing my wrist. The audience gasped, and security rushed in, restraining her as she shouted, her composure shattered. I remained calm, handing the sketchbook to the host, who projected it on a screen for all to see. The evidence was undeniable. My mother's handwriting, a quiet rebuke to Helen's lies. The police arrived, summoned by the staff, and questioned Helen and her friend. I provided a notarized letter from my parents' estate, confirming my inheritance and my right to their creative legacy. The officers warned Helen of defamation charges, their voices stern. She muttered an apology, her eyes burning with resentment, and was escorted out, her friends trailing behind, their heads bowed. As the crowd settled, a man approached, his face weathered but kind. He pressed a small box into my hand, his voice low. "Your mother asked me to give this to you long ago," he said. "She said you'd know when the time was right." I stared at the box, my pulse quickening, but he slipped into the crowd before I could respond. I tucked it into my pocket, its weight a mystery and a comfort. The host returned the microphone, and I thanked the audience, my voice steady. Their applause roared, a wave of validation that drowned out Helen's malice. I left the stage, my mother's sketchbook under my arm, the box a quiet promise. Helen's defeat was a milestone, but Jacob and Mia remained, their betrayal a storm I'd face next. For now I stood in the light, my mother's legacy alive in me, and I knew I was unstoppable. The exhibition's applause faded as I stepped off the stage, Helen's humiliated retreat a fleeting triumph. The small box in my pocket, a gift from my mother delivered by a stranger, felt heavier than the sketchbook under my arm. I slipped into a quiet alcove, opening it to reveal a golden sewing needle, its surface etched with delicate flowers. A note in my mother's handwriting read, "Shine as you always have, Anna." My throat tightened, her words, a guiding light through the shadow of Jacob's betrayal. I'd faced Helen's malice, but Jacob and Mia still loomed, their cruelty a storm I'd soon confront. Days later, I sat in my hotel suite, the golden needle glinting under the lamplight, a symbol of my mother's faith. My new home was taking shape, but peace remained elusive. Jacob had launched a vicious online campaign, live streaming daily on StreamNet. His channel, titled "My Mother Abandoned Me," cast me as a cold, selfish villain. He sat before the camera, his voice quivering with rehearsed sorrow, claiming I'd deserted him to live in luxury while he struggled. Thousands watched their comments brimming with pity for him, venom for me. My name, my face, even my hotel's address spread across the platform, branding me a heartless monster. He sold merchandise, pocketing donations from strangers swayed by his lies. I scrolled through his latest stream, my chest constricting as he spoke. My mother never loved me, he said. She worked dead-end jobs, then vanished when I got married. Now she's rich, and I'm nothing to her. The comments surged, labeling me cruel, inhuman. The betrayal was a fresh wound deeper than his words. In our last fight, each lie a thread unraveling the life I'd sown for him. I picked up a photo from my bag Jacob at his college graduation, his smile radiant, as I'd pinned a boutonniere to his suit. My fingers traced his face, and a quiet longing stirred to believe he could still be the boy who'd hugged me that day. I texted Martha, my hands unsteady. Jacob's slandering me online, I wrote. I see him in this photo, and I want to believe he's sorry. Martha's reply was sharp, unwavering. He's profiting off your pain, Anna, she said. He's not your boy anymore. Show the world the truth. Her words pierced the fog of my heart, a reminder of the cost of Cam Chu. I set the photo down, my resolve stitching together like a torn seam. Jacob had chosen this war, twisting my love into a weapon. I would end it with the truth. I created a StreamNet account, naming my channel The Truth About Jacob's Mother. I gathered evidence, adoption papers, tuition receipts, the house deed. I'd signed over to him and planned my first live stream. Before going live, I held the golden needle, its weight steadying me. My mother's words echoed, urging me to shine. I opened the stream, my face calm before the camera. I'm Anna, the woman Jacob calls heartless, I said. Here's the real story. I spoke clearly, recounting how I'd found Jacob in an orphanage, a frightened 3-year-old abandoned by his birth parents. I described the nights I'd sewn until my hands bled, the years I'd worked multiple jobs to give him a home, an education, a future. I shared the pain of his betrayal, how he'd driven me from the house I'd bought, how Mia and Helen had mocked me as I left. I held up the adoption papers, the receipts, the deed, each document a testament to my sacrifice. I played a recording captured by a neighbor's security system of Mia's voice, sharp and dismissive. Anna, you'd be better off as a maid, she said. We don't need you here. The stream erupted, viewers flooding in their comments a torrent of shock and outrage. This is unbelievable, one wrote. He lied about everything. Another said, she gave him everything, and he threw her away. I leaned into the camera, my voice steady. I planned to leave my inheritance, $6 million from my parents to Jacob and Mia, I said. But they chose to discard me. I'm not heartless. I'm done being their tool. To drive the point home, I donated $50,000 live, splitting it among random viewers, a gesture that sent the chat into a frenzy. Jacob's stream faltered as his followers flocked to mine, his lies crumbling. He went live, his face ashen, his voice frantic. She's manipulating you, he shouted. Those documents are forged. She's always been a liar. But his desperation only fueled the backlash. Viewers flooded his comments, calling him ungrateful, a parasite. I uploaded a final piece of evidence, a notarized trust fund statement, proving the $6 million was mine, legally inherited. The platform's moderators intervened, reviewing my evidence and his streams. They banned his account that night, citing defamation and fraud. Mia, sensing his downfall, vanished. A mutual acquaintance told me she'd moved out, leaving Jacob alone in the house I'd once called home. His followers deserted him, his merchandise unsold, his facade shattered. I hired a lawyer, filing a lawsuit for defamation and to reclaim the house. The court ruled in my favor, the judge's voice firm, as he ordered Jacob to pay damages and return the deed. Jacob disappeared, his phone disconnected, his presence erased from my life. I stood in the reclaimed house's empty living room, sunlight spilling across the bare floor. The space felt like a stranger's, stripped of the warmth I'd poured into it. I held the golden needle, my mother's words whispering through me, "Shine as you always have." I'd exposed Jacob's lies, reclaimed what was mine, and won. But the victory was tinged with sorrow, the loss of the boy I'd loved, a quiet ache. I texted Martha, my words simple. "It's over. I'm free." Her reply was brief, proud. I walked out, locking the door. The house no longer my home. Jacob had taken that, but he couldn't take my strength. The golden needle gleamed in my hand, a promise I'd carry forward to live to shine, no matter the cost. The door of the reclaimed house clicked shut behind me, the sound soft but resolute, like the final stitch in a long, painful seam. I stood on the porch, the golden sewing needle warm in my palm, its etched flowers catching the fading sunlight. Jacob was gone. His lies exposed his world, shattered by the weight of his own greed. The victory was mine, but it carried a quiet sorrow, the loss of the boy I'd raised, lingering like a thread I couldn't cut. I'd fought for my truth, taken back what was rightfully mine, and yet my heart ached for the family I'd once dreamed of. I sold the house within a month, the transaction finalized in a lawyer's office that smelled of ink and polished wood. The money joined the $6 million from my parents' trust fund, but wealth wasn't what I sought. I craved peace, a place where the echoes of betrayal couldn't reach. I found it in a coastal village, a cluster of salt-weathered cottages nestled against the sea. My new home was simple, its whitewashed walls and wide windows welcoming the morning light. I set my sewing machine by a window, the ocean's rhythm a steady companion, and felt a stillness settle over me like fabric smoothed under an iron. I opened a small tailoring workshop, not for profit, but for joy. I taught local children to sew their eager hands, threading needles and stitching patches with clumsy pride. Their chatter filled the space, a gentle tide washing away the scars Jacob had left. I watched a boy named Tommy, barely 9, grin as he finished a lopsided scarf, his eyes bright with triumph. I saw in him the spark I'd once nurtured in Jacob, a spark snuffed out by choices not my own. The memory brought a pang, but I let it drift like sea foam dissolving on the shore. One afternoon, as the sun dipped toward the horizon, I walked to the beach with Martha, who'd come to visit. We sat on a weathered bench, the waves a soft pulse against the sand. I spoke of Jacob, my voice low, heavy with the weight of years. I confessed how I'd clung to hope, searching his eyes for the child I'd saved, even as he wielded my love against me. I admitted the nights I'd lain awake, wondering if I'd failed him, if my Kamchu had somehow pushed him away. Martha listened, her hand resting on mine, her gaze steady as the tide. She spoke then, her words gentle but firm. "You didn't fail him, Anna," she said. "You gave him a life a mother more than most would dare. He chose to break that bond, not you. You're defined by this moment, by the woman who rose from the ashes." Her words wove through me, mending the frayed edges of my heart. I knotted my throat tight and pulled the golden needle from my pocket. I held it up, its flowers glinting in the dusk. "My mother knew," I said. She knew I'd need this, a reminder to shine. Martha's eyes crinkled with a smile. "You're shining now," she said. "Look at this place, these children, this life you've built. You're enough, Anna. More than enough." We sat in silence, the sea's whisper wrapping around us, and for the first time I felt complete, not healed, but whole, as if the pieces of me torn by Jacob's betrayal had found their place. Word came later through a villager who'd seen it online. Jacob was living on the streets far from the city, his clothes tattered, his hands clutching a jacket. I'd sewn him long ago. Its seams fraying, but intact. A video showed him by a curb, his eyes hollow, muttering to himself as passers-by averted their gazes. The image stirred no joy, no anger, only a faint ache, like the memory of a bruise. He'd become a shadow, undone by his own lies, trapped in a cage of his making. I didn't wish him suffering, but I no longer carried his weight. He was his choices, and I was mine. I returned to my workshop, the children's laughter greeting me as I entered. I pinned a new pattern to the fabric, my hands steady, the golden needle gleaming as I worked. The sea breeze carried the scent of salt and freedom, and I breathed it deeply. I'd given Jacob my heart, my years, my everything, and he'd given me lessons in return. I didn't regret adopting him, not for a second, but I regretted the decades I'd spent believing love meant erasing my self-camchu to hold a family that didn't value me. That was the hardest truth, the one that reshaped me. Kindness was sacred, but it had to include me too. I sat by the shore one last time before Martha left, sketching a new dress design in the twilight. The golden needle rested beside me, its flower sharp against the metal. I thought of my mother, of the children in my workshop, of the life I'd woven from the threads of loss. I was Anna, not just a mother, not just a tailor, but a woman who'd learned to shine. The waves rolled in endless and unbroken, and I knew I belonged here, to myself, to this moment, to the future I'd crafted with my own hands. Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story has you wanting more, don't forget to like and subscribe to catch the next journey. Thanks for joining me. See you in the next story.